Good morning, everyone. This is Penny from Wisconsin Land and Water. I am the Conservation Training and Membership Services Manager there. And today we're happy to have Cheryl Scolas to lead us in the farm safety, things to protect your safety and health on the farm. And I've seen this presentation before, and it's great. It's just those little tidbits that we may not think about and that are could be very helpful if we get into some bad circumstances. So again, our presenter is Cheryl, and she is the Senior Outreach Specialist from the UW Center for Agricultural Safety and Health. And I think Cheryl is ready to go.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for taking time. Hopefully a few of you have gotten some rain if you've been needing it. I could have taken a little bit more. I live down here in the Stoughton area between Stoughton and Cambridge. As Penny mentioned, I'm a Senior Outreach Specialist in Agricultural Safety and Health. In my 30th year with Extension and on campus. So over the 30 years, you think farm safety is a general thing, but certainly have seen some changes through the years as things go on. As Penny mentioned, either use the chat if you have a question or a comment. She'll help me monitor those. And then also I'll take and pause and see if you have any questions too. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Your safety and health on a farm. I wanted to take a moment though and look at some recently released research related to 2017-2018 farm fatalities. I put the source that you can find the full reports and the PDFs, but if you look at these numbers here, and I apologize, I'm trying to, there we go. I needed to condense something to see the actual numbers. 2017-2018 farm fatalities. This report is a little bit different in that it included transportation. So individuals that were killed when they had a crash, a motor vehicle crash with that farm equipment out on the road were included with this report. But we can see transportation, those road issues stay high. The machinery part, we're still getting those entanglements, blunt trauma, those overturns, the animals types of things. Falls, of course, continue as we go to new heights with some of our stuff, or even just the common slips and falls, and then some fires that were included. So I encourage you to look at those farm fatality reports just to get the spectrum and the background with our agriculture. And then also the fact that as you're out and about on the countryside, you can also be a farm safety champion, so to speak, that helping people understand that significance, that importance of farm safety, where we have some of these issues, and to kind of relay things back if need be. So as an employee, just want to refocus for a minute that your personal safety is number one. When you go out there, you might have safety, but when you go out as an employee, your personal safety becomes number one. There are those workplace policies, that come into play because to your employer, your personal safety is important. So always discuss with your supervisor, your county risk manager, what are those workplace policies that you have in place? How do you report if something happens? In July of 2019, I got rear-ended on the way home from a farm visit, and I had never been in a motor vehicle crash before. I was using my own personal car, and it brought up a lot of questions on the risk management side. What do I do to report it? How does this go since it has to be my personal car? What would it be different if it was a county vehicle or a state vehicle? Whose insurance covers those pieces of information that you need to have in case something does happen and you need to get that information. It's important that somebody knows where you're going and an approximate time that you return. Going to places that are a little secluded or places that you might not have been before. So it might not be that you have to call and check in, but do you keep an electronic calendar and those appointments on your calendar? Do you have a way, on your phone that somebody can help track you, or that you send a text, I'm going here and I'll be back about this time, or now I'm on the other side of that, I've returned, from this location. And just one of those that, if something happens, warm day, and you get a heat illness, twist your ankle out, looking for you, that all can help save time. Prepare for work, and this is kind of those, well, that's common sense type of a thing, but just that reminder, the importance of proper dress when we're going out there, following those procedures that of what we're to be wearing for any type of PPE. I think that's the one where having that PPE in a kit, being able to grab what you need when you get on site, when you're going to do, easier than saying, oh, I don't have it, I'm going to take a chance. So prepare a kit of things that you can have with you. Just a reminder that the farm you're going to is a work site. OSHA regulations, the OSHA laws, apply on all farms. OSHA can use funds to inspect farms with 10 or more employees. So while a lot of times people think, well, this is a small farm, OSHA doesn't apply here. It does apply to that farm work site. It's just that OSHA can only go out, inspect site on those ones where they have the more than 10 employees. On those smaller farms, it ends up coming into being a court of law. And going out there in your positions into those work sites, might not be under OSHA, you're under the government regulation side of things possibly, or your county insurance. So you just want to be sure that you recognize those work sites and that they do have workplace safety that has to apply too. You're scheduling an appointment, and I think in this day and age, appointments, and when you're making that appointment, asking some of those questions up front. One of my favorites, to be sure, that I always like to know when I come in is, when I get to your farm, where would you like me to park? Because I know, on the farm, we'd have some of those salespeople through the years that they'd come and they'd park right in the way of our traffic flow, or they'd park but close to where we're working, and then the next, piece of loaded wagon would come in. So just being able to know where to park, how to reach them. I know a lot of farms these days, when I get on site, it'll be, go and I'll meet you here. We don't want to walking through buildings or trying to find somebody in places that we're not sure about. So knowing where to meet that person is important. With the increase of dog bites over the years, and the insurance companies will have talked about what do we do about dogs and the bites and their claims on these, just checking is, do I need to be concerned about any dogs that will greet me? Because when you get to the farm, stay in your car so that we can be sure that, our dog Charlie, doesn't try to show you too much love, or, he's a little protective of people coming around. So taking time, asking some of those questions, getting some of that information, kind of making a little bit of introduction while you're scheduling that appointment. Also, discussing anything that you're going to need from them so that you're prepared on both sides of things and they know what to expect from you. When you arrive at the farm, just a couple of things to think about as, before you're pulling in. Worked with a program for a number of years, and did a lot of staff training with it. And one of our big things was park so you're heading out, because you may know these people, you may be going out on new calls, but you might not know, are they in a good place, and is there something that could agitate them? So if you come in, you can park so you're heading out. If something gets in a conflict that you can't de-escalate, you're ready to be getting out of there. Asking ahead, are there children? But even when you get there, watching out for those children that might be in the yard, might be toys around, just taking time to look out for those kids. Keep your keys with you. We just talked about kids, and sometimes, keys in vehicles are temptations to some of the young children, but it also means that nobody, you're in control of your vehicle. You're ready to go if something comes up. Also consider biosecurity for your protection and the farm's protection. And I think in this day and age, after coming through or being in the COVID pandemic, we all know a lot more about biosecurity. And so I didn't put a lot in about COVID procedures because each of your COVID requirements are for you. But along with those COVID protections, consider the other biosecurity protection, footwear, is it washable or do you need covering? Are you going into an area that you may need to put on a Tyvek cover just to keep yourself clean or to not transfer anything in? How many visits are you going to make in a day? Right now with the COVID, we really wouldn't recommend going from farm to farm without being able to sanitize and get everything cleaned up. So think about your biosecurity processes as you're when you get on that farm. This picture, it came up from John Ramsden through NRCS back when we were doing some manure gas safety. And, it's really easy to come onto a site, work can be going on, and this image just kind of portrays that part of, when you get there, what's happening, how are other people dressed, am I prepared, and not putting yourself into a dangerous location without that proper equipment. Watch your step, and once again, this sounds like one of those common, sense types of things. But, one time I was out on a farm and we were out in this grassy area, and with no indication, those grass and weed areas manure storage system. And, that next step would have put me into that old manure storage system because the grass was growing on top and just a lot of factors to it. So, looking at what's going on, slowing down if the individual is, leading the way, just kind of taking your time, stop and ask some questions just to kind of give yourself a chance to survey the area and to be knowing, what you're going in. Do you have the proper footwear if you were going to walk into an area? So watch your step, be looking around, and again, checking those surroundings to keep yourself safe. Confined spaces. And this is a big area for me. Some of the facilities that you may be helping to put in fall into those technicalities of confined spaces. And so, really when we look at an agricultural work site, we have a lot of different spaces that technically fit the definition of being a confined space. So, we got that limited exit and entry. We don't have that ventilation to make it a working space, but yet somebody can get into it. There could be that dangerous atmosphere. And the image that you see in front of you was with cap and NRCS land conservation back about 2007, 2008, went out to a dairy facility to look at one of these manure channels under the barn. And, this is a real confined space. But yet, there was that point of time in agriculture, we weren't talking about these as in confined spaces. We weren't looking at those workplaces and the same, safety hats that we are now. So, when you come to some of these facilities, the manure tanks, the under barn channels, the grain bins, our upright silo structures, any of those, that can be confined spaces, know that they're confined spaces, work with those people on their safety plans if you're helping to construct something, and address what is a confined space and what they're going to have on what type of a structure or a facility that they are looking to build by considering what it takes to make a safe entry or exit into a confined space. If you aren't trained for that confined space entry, you don't have that proper equipment, do not go into these confined spaces. And I think some of you probably have the workplace policies already that make that statement, but I'm going to reinforce to not enter them. One of the things about confined spaces that I think I find most concerning is the atmospheric hazards. We don't know what's in some of these at any given point of time. It was brought back up to me just the other day when we had a custom manure hauler from Ohio that had been up to our trainings and calling with their concern after an employee got sick, doing a pump out in a hog operation and, looking at that hydrogen sulfide factor. We have a lot of grain that could have the mold and the mycotoxins, just your potential to, in a short time, have an exposure that really can impact your health. So when it's marked do not enter, or it's a confined space, do not enter unless you are trained for that facility and part of that confined space team. Even if it's something like this tank, it seems more open, but this individual working down in here would have limited exit. There's that potential of the atmosphere. We have some places where those, gases aren't going to be moving out of, other factors. We know hydrogen sulfide is that heavier than air gas, and it's going to sink down and be hard to move out of this space, but we also know that the methane is that lighter than air and it's our flammable. And I had one custom operator that went in one of the channels to do some repair for a farmer and struck up the welder and said, the flash of the flame went all the way to the rafters of this large dairy barn. Once it was burned off, the methane was gone. But, we don't know what's in there and some of those risks. So staying away from some of these places unless you're making an inspection, but you don't have to go into them. So it was almost 4 years ago, about this time, that August 16th, and that we had a young beef farmer in Wisconsin that died alongside an open air manure storage, and it really had us asking some questions, looking at, what was different. We typically would be thinking about those manure gases inside a closed structure, and here open air. But on that early August morning, limited wind, an inversion in the area according to some airport records, agitating and breaking through that cross, stirring up that slurry, the use of some feed products that were higher in sulfur, potentially, increasing the amount of available sulfur to produce the hydrogen sulfide. So, we now know that even these open structures, there are some of those atmospheric hazards that are a risk. We also have a lot of places for falls. You guys probably get questions on fencing these, and seeing some minimal fences out there that meet the requirements, but yet truly aren't going to prevent somebody from falling into it. So as you're designing these, as you're working around them, going out and checking on them, working with those individuals, helping them understand some of their safety risk once they start using them is really valuable. And you might be putting in some of the manure or leachate pump transfers, and I just want to mention these. You see on this pump, there's that open cover, and on this farm, that was the practice. We don't put a cover over the top of it and for various reasons, I found a number of these through the years that aren't covered. And one time I was walking back by a storage area, and that watch where you're walking type of a thing, and I went to look at the cover on it. They had changed the grate over the cover, so there was a cover, but they had made the holes in the cover big enough so when I went to step on it, my foot went straight between the bars of that grid. So it worked for them, but somebody else coming out there could have, potentially injured themselves because it wasn't marked. There's a reason that the grid on that cover was smaller to start with. It didn't help with keeping the plant material from plugging up, but it also, by changing it, they had created a human hazard out there. So looking at some of those places, being sure that those covers, those lids are designed and staying on. I'm going to stop there a minute, Penny. I've somehow lost my view of my chat, but just wanted to see if there was any questions or comments, concerns around confined spaces, because I know it is a big topic.
I don't see that anyone sent any in, so I think you can just continue on. But that's just a good reminder to everyone to send in your questions through the chat box during her presentation.
Hey, sounds good. Oops. No, I don't want to leave the meeting. I certainly hit the
No,
wrong button there.
no.
All righty. Working around machinery, and I'm not sure when you go out to the work site, if you need to operate machinery or if you are just out on that work site where equipment is present and being used. In this case, we were measuring up equipment for implements of husbandry when the rules of the road were being changed. But I used it because I think you get a perspective of the size of some of the equipment that we're using these days, where we might not see somebody, because if you look at the height of the tires versus the height of the people that are standing close by, we're not going to be seeing them. So if you have to be around equipment, keep yourself visible, stay in the path of that operator so that they can see you. That would be one of the cases that I would say, when you go to that work site, put on a high visibility vest so that, like our road workers do, you want to be seen out there in that workplace to the other people that are operating around. And even if you're not going to be, in and close by where this machinery is, a lot of times on our modern operation, we have a lot of traffic flow to things and people coming and going. So being in, bright, high vis vest or brighter clothing to help identify that you're on that work site and to make yourself seen is important. When you look around this equipment, we got a lot of power, we got a lot of strength to what's being transferred. The hydraulics these days, I really like hydraulics, but there's a lot of pressure and a lot of release to them. I think you look at the size of the hitch on this trailer, having it all connected and just what it takes to tow this. And then for all of our equipment, we have a lot of that power takeoff, that drive line. So taking the power from that tractor, transferring it. These are an area that if you get in too close, say the individual is sitting there, working, waiting for a wagon to unload, stirring something up with an agitator, wait till they're done, staying away. There's a high hazard zones around these PTOs within 2 feet that they say you can still become entangled. It doesn't take much to become entangled in a power takeoff. And even though this PTO has the full shield to it, all 3 parts are present on it, you can still become caught in that PTO. And this would be one that if you're working with a farmer and you see that PTO shield is broken, cracked, politely making a way to say, that shield really would be a good investment to get it repaired and prevent potential entanglements to it. And so PTOs and drive lines are really valuable parts of our machinery, but also real high hazards in working around them. If there's equipment that you're not familiar with and you're going to be out helping with something or checking something out, or just want to learn more about that piece of equipment, take a look at the caution warning danger signs. At a farm show one time, I walked around a manure spreader and there was 18 different caution warning danger signs. Now, might be a little bit too much, but it certainly showed all the risk and where those danger points were and the recommendations of what to do. Turning the power off before anything gets worked with is really important. We can't become entangled if we've have that power off and that stored energy is out of there. So when I look at those caution signs, they're good reminders for what I may need to be doing, but also help familiarize people with that piece of equipment. This time of year, as we get ready for the grain harvest, called the entanglers. Those augers, elevators, conveyors, you might be looking at systems to help with grain storage or even some other part of your work that involves the augers, elevators, and conveyors. And so, if you look at this auger in this image, without that protective shield over the top of this, you're right into that auger. And, we can look at case after case that individuals, when they become entangled in these augers, high levels of amputations, very severe injuries, young kids that have, inadvertently fallen into these, being out around where mom or dad was working. So they're another piece where, shields and guards, and even if it's a piece that you get above the 7 feet requirement, but somebody's working around there, you might want to recommend some additional shield or protection to those areas. But I always, hate during that harvest season, because even on our machinery, we have a lot of these augers and seen some pretty severe injuries through the years as a result of somebody becoming entangled. We're using that pressure, and so those things under pressure, I already mentioned the hydraulic hoses. If you see a leak, don't try to touch it with your hands. If you get exposed to hydraulic fluid in your skin, seek medical treatment. You want to get that out of that injury, and you need to have that done by a medical professional to get that hydraulic fluid cleaned out of you. It's not going to be like a sliver and work its way out. You need to get that hydraulic taken out. Drag hoses are one of those areas that, as we're changing how we transport manure, we see a lot more of the drag hose being used by the custom operators as well as by on farms. And this whole system, we've had cases of the individual was killed when a cover came off one of the pumps. We've had individuals injured trying to get the hose through the culvert and getting pulled in when they were trying to pull it through. We've had individuals that have been injured when there's laying these lines and it's ruptured. So with these drag hoses, seeing a lot more injuries and potential for, situations to happen with them. So while you can keep checking them on, and who's ever operating them needs to be responsible for checking and laying them. But if you're out and about and around them, be aware of the risk of those hoses. And especially if you get called out because there's been transportation, a manure spill, or some factor with the system that's caused an environmental concern, know that you could be going out because there's already been some damage to that system, and that potentially could lead to other problems down the road. Safety with animals. And I just took and had some fun with this bull picture because, a lot of times we've grown up working with animals. We're familiar with working with animals, that cow that licks us, is happy, but, on the backside of things, we might not be seeing the danger that can be presented. So which side of the fence will you be on? And, when you go out there, if you're going out to check a grazing area or do some pasture improvement or um, working on a creek bed or something that takes you out into that back part, knowing what animals are going to be there, what the risks are, and even if it might not be that bull, knowing that there could be that cow with a calf that's going to be protected. You're coming into their space. And why the farmer might say, oh, they're okay, they're calm animals. You're new to them, and to them, they're seeing you as that predator, and they're going to take and want to be protective. And their sense of hearing is so sharp, and that sense of being put on guard is a natural instinct to them. This morning I was watching the news for a couple of minutes and sitting on my couch and looked out my sunroom door, and here is this doe, and as soon as I stood up from the couch, her head came up, her ears went, and just that wild animal, that alertness to a sound, such a good distance away. This is also just that reminder of biosecurity, and not so much here the biosecurity for the animals or the disease spread, but your biosecurity. Think about what you could be carrying home with you to your family. Different pathogens that are out there, transferable by the manure, the soil, and you want to be sure that you're not taking any of those home and back to your house where you might be getting your family sick. So again, anytime we're around those animals, following strong biosecurity practices for both the animals and ourselves, not bringing those zoonotic diseases home with us. You might be working out in that back 40, your encounters with different types of wildlife through the years, letting them know that you're out there. You might also be finding other people that are trespassing or things that, that land operator might not always be present, as I think of things with farmers, but you might be going to land where people, aren't typically out there. And so you could find some different situations that are unexpected. What's your procedure? How do you handle those? I think it was just recently that I read, like there was a a school administrator that got stung by bees or hornets or something and ended up passing away from that. So wildlife, those encounters, being prepared for some of those unexpected things. Once again, comes back, if you're out there at a distance, having the people knowing where you're going and when you plan to be back in case something happens. Do you have those imminent danger situations? So NRCS, from the manual, we use their language that when you observe an unsafe situation, such as a farmer down in a trench with no escape, warn them of the danger, stop the construction if it's their project, and immediately leave the site until the situation is corrected. So, if you find yourself in that situation where you feel like somebody is in imminent danger, try to get that situation corrected. Trenches is a great example, where we know that that soil is soft, or they might be working too close to an existing pipeline without the proper procedures. Feel comfortable in that. It's better to stop, try, can't, say, I need to leave, and follow up with your proper supervisors or somebody to make sure that that gets brought up and pointed out that, you observe this really dangerous situation and is a project that you're working on, and want to be sure that everybody comes through that project okay. So what are your plans to address those imminent dangerous situations? Be prepared for an emergency. You don't know what our day brings. It might not be an emergency on the work site that you're going to. Other emergencies could come up along the way. Having some type of a first aid kit or supply in your vehicle, even for the little things. I mean, there's been a couple of times where it's been like, I hit something and got a cut on my finger, and it's like, all right, just having that supply kit. I would say with that first aid kit in this day and age, it's going to be that extra hand sanitizer or a sanitizing spray that can be part of that first aid kit too, along with the mask and requirements. Clean clothes. I always like to have that spare set along. You just don't know what could happen. I also think that if I get out there in a biosecurity situation and I can change clothes at some point before I get into my vehicle, or be able to take some, a sweatshirt off or that coverall off, and not get into that vehicle that I could spread it to the seat covers, or something like that can help out. I've also done a lot of walkthroughs in manure storage and handling structures for. I have a tendency not to come through those really clean. So I'll just, say, is there a restroom that I can use to change clothes before I head out, and being prepared that way. Having contact numbers along, in case something happens, you need to reach somebody. Don't rely just on your phone, because we get out to some of these sites, and I know my cell service from here in the Madison area, when I get up north around Eau Claire, sometimes gets funky. So having some of those numbers posted someplace, having somebody as your backup, that you have those contact numbers with, that somebody might know your office number, and that would be the way that they could reach. In this day and age, de-escalating a situation is really important. And if you find yourself out there in a situation where the person is, upset, you feel threatened, how are you going to talk to that person? How are you going to handle it? It could be making that call back to the office, or making that call back to somebody that you have set up with the plan, and that you have that code word, you know, that you have a phrase that says, so that a coworker, you know, comes out and you stay there. It may be that, you know, that trigger that you're trying to get out of that situation and to be sure to be checking on you when you come back. But talk through those different situations that you may need to have those de-escalating techniques and something pre-planned. And like I said, having that system worked out ahead of time, a code word, an action, something that, you know, you've thought about and somebody on your team has looked at. It's always important to be prepared for those emergencies. A lot of times, you know, people say, it's okay, I know I can call 911. And this might be a little bit of a personal bias coming through, but you know, 911 is only part of being prepared for an emergency. You know, a few years back, my dad had been in the hospital. We got dad home, and my mom had been so stressed that she ended up experiencing a type of fainting that presented like a stroke. Called the farm, and the response was, you know, are you sure you have the right fire number? We don't show anything in that location. And, you know, the farm had been there for years and years and years. It was the only fire number they ever had. And to discover that, you know, on a Dane County emergency map, the farm didn't exist was a little bit unnerving. So not just relying on 911, having some prepared actions and plans for some different situations. And as you discuss amongst yourself, you're going to know some of those situations and have some experiences with been working a few years, and you could take and, you know, just create an exercise for yourself talking through those different emergencies. So without anybody interrupting me or asking questions, I have gone through my content here pretty quickly, Penny.
Well,
So we can see if anybody has questions or additional comments that they would like to add in.
great. Yeah, great reminders for us. So at this point, any questions in the chat box? Or we'll be quiet for a second or two here and let you unmute yourself and ask questions directly to Cheryl. Well, it's pretty quiet, so I think you may have answered everyone's questions. What is your email address in case people want to contact you directly, possibly?
Email address is scolas@wisc.edu. So S as in Sam, KJOL, A as in Apple, A as in Apple, S as in Sam, at wisc.edu. My office phone number is 608-265-0568, and it transfers to my cell phone these days. So if you get out there, especially this time of year, you know, you can be helpful for us if an incident happens, or somebody has a question, you know, somebody got sick, we're not sure what it could be. You know, feel free to get in touch and bring us into the situation. So Amanda says she has a question. Any ideas of other tools to use to contact for help? Some of us do not have work issued cell phones. Many people do not have landlines. I know there's some type, you know, some of devices that could be like a warning type of a system back to somebody. I really think in this day and age, it's a good conversation to have with your employers of how to get that, you know, have that communication device, and being able to have something that for work you can take out there. And if it's not that it's, a cell phone that can be dedicated to you, is there one that can be, um, check it out? Or looking at some of those lone worker type of devices that provide a warning back to somebody on the cell phone, or at a given number would be another way that I could think of. But I think that's one where your employer has some responsibility to that, and to be able to have that conversation would be good.
And I think you probably mentioned, yeah, to have the, location where you're at. And I think at check back in time, we used to have people, um, if they weren't back at the end of the day, we would follow up with them just to sometimes see where they were at.
Right. And I admit my cell phone is my personal cell phone. We do not have the work issued cell phones, but I do, I use it. But I think in this case, some way that if you get out on, you're out there on site. Um, and I need to look more at some of those lone worker devices with the GPS, because I think we have a lot of ag sites that might benefit from where those newer technologies are coming these days.
Interesting. Yeah, and if you get those, maybe we can share those with our membership.
And just as you're out there, if you find yourself in a situation that you don't have like a multi-gas monitor and you're concerned about something, Becky Larson is our bio waste specialist in the Department of Biological Systems Engineering and has an extension appointment. Um, she has a research project that's been delayed due to COVID, but we're going to be looking more at like manure gases and the outside storage type of thing. So our department does have a couple of multi-gas monitors. Some of our extension agents for teaching the nutrient management trainings have multi-gas monitors located in different areas across the state, as well as we have some single gas hydrogen sulfide monitors that are out there. So if something comes up or somebody needs some help along that lines of looking at, gas monitoring the atmospheric hazards, feel free to get in touch, and we can help, either make connections, help talk you through, or look at the situation and evaluate it with you.
Do we have any more questions, or else we're probably going to call it a wrap for today? You get done a little bit early. Seeing or hearing none, thank you, Cheryl, very much. I really appreciate it. And I hope everyone has a great day. And if you got rain, I hope you didn't get too much and got received what you probably needed for some of your farm fields and everything out there. Have a great day. Thanks again, Cheryl, and stay well, everyone.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much.